Hello everybody. I would like to thank everyone for attending our webinar today. I hope everyone has been having a good day so far. Now, before we dive into the exciting topic of strategies and policies for nonprofit board governance, I do need to take care of a few housekeeping items. First, let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Joe Medrano. I have spent over 30 years of my life doing what I love. Every day, I get the privilege of helping people protect what is important to them. I have an ARM, which is an Associate in Risk Management designation from the Insurance Institute of America. I'm an author, entrepreneur, but best of all, I am the proud father of a beautiful daughter. I work with many different types of organizations, from small mom-and-pop shops to large publicly traded multinational corporations. However, I have a passion for working with nonprofits. It allows me to assist individuals and organizations whose primary purpose is to help others. Today's webinar was created specifically for 501c3 nonprofits with the assistance of attorney Don Tenconi and the law firm of Vanderpoel, Levy, Allen, and Arneal. Don has practiced law for over 30 years, and he has several years' experience working with nonprofits. Both Don and I have started and helped govern 501c3 nonprofits. We understand the hard work and dedication you commit to every day as a board member of a nonprofit. We also understand that some days it can be overwhelming. But that is why we are here today, to help you and to provide you with guidance to help make it a little less overwhelming. During the webinar, if a question pops into your mind, please write it down, and at the end of the webinar, you can email us at webinar@nonprofitguidance.com, and we will answer any questions you have. Okay, with that said, let's begin. Now, there are many strategies to good or proper board governance. Our goals and objectives today are to provide you with some training. Hopefully, in the process, we will convey some new knowledge that will benefit you personally, with the ultimate objective being to increase the overall effectiveness of your board. We know your time is valuable. We hope to provide you with a lot of information in a short amount of time. What we plan to cover today is: what is good governance? Who should serve on your board? Responsibilities of a nonprofit board? How nonprofit boards fail or succeed? How to ensure a successful board meeting? And organizational assessments. As you can see, it is a lot of information to cover in a very short time, so I'm going to do my best to keep to 45 minutes. What is good board governance anyway? First, what is governance? Nonprofit governance refers to the process of providing leadership, direction, and accountability. As a board member of a nonprofit, you must recognize that you have certain legally enforceable duties and obligations by virtue of your membership on the board. These duties and obligations are relevant only to the official governing board itself and do not apply to the non-governing bodies of your board, such as an advisory board or non-voting committees. Now that we know what governance is, what is good governance? Good governance is about the processes for making and implementing decisions. It is not necessarily about making correct decisions, but about the best possible process for making those decisions. Good decision-making processes will usually result in good governance. Both have a positive effect on various aspects of your nonprofit, including policies and practices, meeting procedures, protocols, officer conduct, role clarification, and good working relationships. Good decisions will also include fairness, accountability, responsibility, and transparency. Let's start with fairness. Your board should always try to serve the needs of the entire organization while balancing competing interests in a timely, appropriate, and responsive manner. Good governance is equitable and inclusive. Each board member should feel their interests have been considered by the board in the decision-making process. This means that all board members participate in the process, meaning anyone affected by or interested in the decision should have the opportunity to participate in the process for making that decision. You can utilize committees for this to get feedback from others not on the board who your decision will impact. This leads to accountability. Accountability is a fundamental requirement of good governance. Nonprofit boards have an obligation to report, explain, and be answerable for the consequences of decisions it has made on behalf of the organization. Good governance is effective and efficient. Your board should implement decisions and follow processes that make the best use of the available people, resources, and time to ensure the best possible results for the organization. All nonprofit boards have a responsibility and obligation to follow the rules of law. This means that decisions are consistent with relevant legislation or common law and are within the powers of the board. You have a duty of care, which is taking the care and exercising the judgment that any reasonable and prudent person would exhibit in the process of making informed decisions, including acting in good faith, consistent with what you as a member of the board truly believes is in the best interest of the organization. The law recognizes and accepts that board members may not always be correct in their choices or decisions, but it does hold them accountable for being attentive, diligent, and thoughtful in considering and acting on a policy, course of action, or other decision. Active preparation for and participation in board meetings where important decisions are to be made is an integral element of the duty of care. Duty of loyalty, which calls upon the board and its members to consider and act in good faith to advance the interests of the organization. In other words, board members will not authorize or engage in transactions except those in which the best possible outcomes or terms for the organization can be achieved. This standard constrains a board member from participating in board discussions and decisions when they as an individual have a conflict of interest. Duty of obedience, which requires obedience to the organization's mission, bylaws, and policies, as well as honoring the terms and conditions of other standards of appropriate behavior, such as laws, rules, and regulations. Board members are obligated to honor these standards with regard to all decisions and actions of the board, and those who do not may be subject to civil and even criminal sanctions, including sanctions imposed by the Internal Revenue Service, in cases of inappropriate personal benefit. Good governance is also transparent. People should be able to follow and understand the decision-making process. This means that they will be able to clearly see how and why a decision was made, what information, advice, and consultation was considered before a decision was made. Now, who should serve on a nonprofit board? When you're looking for new board members, what skills should you look for in a board member? My answer would be, it changes every time you add a new board member. What do I mean by that? You currently have a board of directors, so what you need to do each time you are searching for new board members is look at the strengths and weaknesses of your current board members and what gaps you need or would like to fill with the selection of your new board member. Now, I realize this is easier said than done, but that is a good place to start. Hopefully, you currently have a diverse board of individuals with different or overlapping strengths that benefit your organization. Do you have someone on your board with a legal background or an insurance background, a CPA maybe? Having board members with legal, insurance, and financial backgrounds are a big asset to boards. However, someone with a passion for your organization and willing to learn can be an even better board member. Passion and commitment are just as important, if not more so, than specific professional skills. You should be looking at your volunteers, donors, and young professionals to try and find leaders who can benefit your organization. You should have a year-round nominating committee that is searching for new board members all year long. This is an important committee that too often is only utilized by smaller nonprofits a couple months before an election, which usually results in just finding a body instead of an asset that can be a benefit to your board. The next question I get is, how many board members should we have? Most states have a requirement for a minimum number of 3, but other than that, your board can decide what is best for your organization. It has been my experience that the most effective boards have 5 or 7 board members. In my opinion, 3 is not enough, and 9 or more can be too many depending on the organization. Too many chefs and not enough cooks sometimes spoils the meal, but it is up to you to decide what is right for your needs. Now, how long should a board term be? Here again, this will be different for every organization, but I believe a term should be 2 or 3 years. 1 year is usually not enough time to get things done, and 4 to 5 years, people can tend to begin to get a little complacent. The other recommendation is to have the term staggered. So if you have 5 board members, you should have 2 renew on even years and 3 renew on odd years, or vice versa. This allows you to add new talent while also keeping continuity on the board. But more important than what skills someone may have when they join the board, or how long they should serve, or how many you should have, is the training program you have set up for your board members. Every board member should be given an orientation and ongoing training, an orientation that details the organization, its history, its values, and your mission and specific board training. As well, many individuals join a board without fully understanding their moral and legal obligations of serving on a 501c3 nonprofit. It is your organization's responsibility to make sure you provide them the training and guidance they need. Many nonprofits will incorporate training into every board meeting. As one of your first agenda items, you can have a short 10 to 15 minute training on a specific topic. We can help you with this if you like. Dawn and I have written a book that we would recommend you give every prospective board member a copy. Our book, Nonprofit Guidance for the Nonprofit Board Member, is a great guide that gives an overview of expectations and obligations of being on a nonprofit board without being overwhelming. It is something your board members can refer to ongoing. It can be read in a few hours, and after they read the book, if they still want to be a board member, you will have a strong and dedicated board member. The book is only $24.95. However, at the end of this webinar, we will show you how to receive a 20% discount if you order a copy within the next 5 days. You can also use the book for your 10 to 15 minute trainings before each meeting. By picking a chapter and discussing before a meeting will help you cover trainings for several meetings. Now let's talk about the role and responsibilities of your board. What type of policies and procedures does your nonprofit follow? Do you have policies in place regarding board performance? Your state association of nonprofits may be a good resource to obtain identifying principles, practices, and standards for nonprofits in your state. They may even offer free educational programs on good governance practices. Do you have an executive director or CEO? If yes, do you review and approve their compensation and benefits each year? Do you document how the board determined that the compensation is appropriate and not excessive? Did you do a comparison analysis of any kind of other similar nonprofits? What type of compliance policies do you have in place? Do you have an annual review of your conflict of interest policy? Many nonprofits have a conflict of interest policy, but do you review it annually and document it in your board minutes each time it is reviewed? Also, having a conflict of interest policy is one thing, but recognizing when there is a conflict is another matter. What would you do if you found a board member to have a conflict of interest? Once you recognize a conflict, you have to address it, no matter who the board member is with the conflict. I know that can be difficult, but you do have to address it. Do you have a written gift acceptance policy? Having a gift acceptance policy in place is considered a best practice by the IRS. If you do have one in place, you will need to fill out the Schedule M on your IRS Form 990. Do you have a written document retention or destruction policy? A document retention and destruction policy identifies the record retention responsibilities of staff, volunteers, board members, and outsiders for maintaining and documenting the storage and destruction of the organization's documents and records. Do you have a written whistleblower protection policy? A whistleblower policy encourages staff and volunteers to come forward with credible information on illegal practices or violations of adopted policies of the organization. Specifies that the organization will protect the individual from retaliation, and it identifies those staff or board members or outside parties to whom such information can be reported. All of these policies are important to have in place no matter how small your organization may be. They are good reminders to board members that they have a higher duty of care because you are a 501c3 nonprofit. Boards and board members often need to be reminded that they have a fiduciary responsibility to the organization and ultimately to the larger community within which they serve. At its core, fiduciary responsibility is the responsibility to treat the resources of the organization as a trust, and the responsible board will ensure that these resources are utilized in a reasonable, appropriate, and legally accountable manner. While the phrase often is used to refer especially to financial resources, it applies to the stewardship of all of the assets and resources of the organization. In general, the appropriate exercise of fiduciary responsibility includes and adoption and implementation of a set of policies to govern the acquisition and use of financial and other resources. Establishment on a regular basis, usually annual, of a budget that allocates financial resources to the programs and activities that will accomplish the organization's mission, vision, and goals and outcomes, and hopefully they're in alignment with the strategic plan. Development and implementation or review of an ongoing system for monitoring and holding staff and volunteers accountable for their performance with regard to these policies and budgets. Having the entire board review a copy of your IRS Form 990 before it is filed. Unfortunately, many smaller nonprofits assign their treasurer on the board to work with an accountant to complete the 990 and then file it without a complete review and formal approval of the 990 by the board. In addition, if asked, you are required to disclose your annual tax returns with the public. You should have a location on your website where the public can access and review at least the last 3 years of your returns. As a 501c3 nonprofit, you must make your returns available. And you should have an independent external review process, such as an independent audit, on a regular basis, again, usually annual, to assess the organization's fiscal condition and health, including the effectiveness of its systems and policies for the protection and appropriate use of financial resources. Always remember, professional advice is available, and you should seek expert advice if needed, even if you have to spend a little money occasionally. Now that we have discussed roles and responsibilities of the board as a whole, we are going to move into the roles and responsibilities of the individual board member. You individually are accountable for honoring the same 3 fiduciary duties as is the entire board. You individually must exhibit due care, the duty of loyalty, and the duty of obedience on behalf of the organization on whose board you serve. As a board member, you need to not only understand your organization, but you should be aware of what other similar nonprofits are doing, what works and doesn't work. You should share those ideas. You need to follow policies implemented. You should only make requests to the CEO or executive director and not staff, as it should be done at the board level, not on an individual basis. As a board member, you need to participate and ask questions. Board members need to understand the amount of time to fulfill their duties and allocate that time to the organization. It does take a significant amount of time being on a board, so be prepared. You should work together as a board, but remember, each board member should remain independent and provide their own thoughts and guidance, not someone else's. You also need to make sure you do not expose confidential information or badmouth other board members. Recently, there was a case where a board member left an organization, filed a press release that made negative remarks about another board member and the organization. The organization sued, and the former board member had to pay $4 million to the organization and the other board member who was defamed. Be civil with each other, even if you disagree vehemently about an issue. After that issue is resolved, you come together and remain as one to the public. In addition, you need to know the organization, its mission, the services it provides, policies and procedures, and be aware of any programs and how they work. You are an ambassador of the organization. You should let everyone know you are a board member and be prepared to answer general questions about the organization. Next, you need to attend all of the board meetings. If you are going to serve on a board, you need to be at the meetings. This is the only place where boards can take formal action on behalf of the nonprofit. And not just show up for the meetings, but be prepared for them as well. You should have reviewed the agenda and supporting materials prior to the meeting, so you are prepared to discuss the items on the agenda. In addition to attending the meetings, you need to be willing to serve on committees and offer to take on special assignments if needed. As a board member, even if you are not on the nominating committee, you should always be on the lookout for possible nominees to the board who could benefit the organization. Serving on a nonprofit board is a very worthwhile endeavor. However, there is a big time commitment that is needed from you, and you should be prepared to make that commitment. Now, let's discuss a couple bad habits that nonprofit boards should avoid. The first bad habit is meddling. This is when you allow your executive director or CEO to be involved in the decision-making process of the board. It is the board's job to determine how well and the executive director's job to determine how will. By allowing the ED to be involved in board decisions, it makes it more difficult for the board to hold them accountable. But more problematic than meddling is the board micromanaging your executive director or CEO. It is not the board's responsibility to run the day-to-day operations of the organization, unless you have no employees and the board is managing every aspect of the nonprofit. If you have an ED, it is their responsibility to determine how will they meet the board's objectives. If the ED is not meeting the requirements of the board, then the board takes action at a board meeting, but they should not be micromanaging the day-to-day operations. The flip side of micromanaging the executive director is just rubber stamping everything that is presented to you by the ED. It is the job of the executive director and or other board members to present the board with recommendations. But it is the board's job to fully discuss and vet any item on their agenda before voting on it. Too often boards can get comfortable and just vote yes on items to speed up the meeting. Now, I know none of you have these bad habits, but you want to make sure your other board members avoid them as well. Now, no one likes to think that it could ever happen to them, but why do some boards and ultimately the organization fail? There are several reasons why nonprofit boards fail. One, lack of experience. Many people are asked to be on a board because the nonprofit is trying to fill a vacant position, not because that person has the necessary skills to help the board and the organization. This is why every board should have an ongoing nominating committee to search for future board members all year round. This is the best way to build a pipeline of strong board members. 2, dictatorships. Nonprofit boards are not a dictatorship. However, some small organizations have a founder that believes the nonprofit belongs to them and their control, and that the other board members are there to meet his or her needs and goals for the organization. This is a surefire way to have significant turnover of your board and discourages new ideas and strategies for running the organization more effectively. Non-participative board members. Every board member should participate in the decision-making process and provide input on every decision being made by the board. If board members are not contributing, it means they are not engaged in the mission of the organization. Inadequate size or diversity. If your board is too small, that board members are overwhelmed with duties, or your board is too large, causing meetings to run too long and making it difficult to come to a consensus. Ineffective time allocation. Board members do not have enough time to be on the board. They show up to meetings unprepared. They do not have time to contribute to board duties. You spend too much time on one topic and not enough time on another. Being reactive instead of proactive focus. Your board spends all of its time being reactive instead of proactive. Now, this may be necessary if you are turning an organization around, but it should be for a very limited time, and you need to set strict timelines to when you will get back on track, or at a minimum, set a short time frame to start including board agenda items that are proactive while you are finishing up the problems you're resolving or reacting to. Reviewing the past. You need to understand the past to move forward, but some boards get stuck on doing the same thing over and over just because it has always been done that way. A nonprofit is just like a for-profit corporation in that if a nonprofit does not adapt and change with the times, they will become obsolete just like for-profit corporations do when they do not keep up. What happens when board members fail? In a for-profit corporation, correcting errant board members is straightforward. If the investors don't like what the directors are doing, they vote them out of office. Nonprofit corporation boards must be self-correcting. Many governmental agencies regulating the nonprofit sector tend to be small and under-resourced, making it highly unlikely that any but the most obvious misconduct will be detected and corrected from the outside. Unless board members are doing something illegal or a term limited out of office, they may serve in perpetuity, giving them ultimate power over the organization. In this regard, nonprofit trusteeship is a unique and privileged role. Just as there are reasons why some nonprofit boards fail, there are reasons and process why some boards are more successful than others. So let's discuss those now. The first thing to remember is that it is the board's responsibility to determine and set goals on how well the organization should do. And it is the job of the executive director or individual board members, in the event there are no employees, to determine how will these goals be accomplished. So if no employees, the board as a whole determines how well, but each individual director who's assigned specific duties will determine how well their specific duties will get done. It is then it is then the board's responsibility as a whole to determine if it met their expectations. How does your board make this happen? By ensuring the quality of the information supplied. Communication, communication, communication. The board needs to make sure they provide clear and quality information and direction the organization must take to meet the goals set by the board. The board may have disagreements and or debates during their discussions of board items, but after the vote on an item, even if it is a split vote, it is the obligation and duty of the board to move forward united on the resolution, providing a clear and united position to employees and volunteers and the general public will improve the success of your board and organization. You have to have role clarity between the board and executive director or CEO. The board needs to remember that the executive director or CEO is in charge. The board hired him or her to run the organization. You need to allow this person to make those decisions for the day-to-day operations. It is the CEO's job to interact with the employees and volunteers on a day-to-day basis and to provide the board's vision to the employees and volunteers. It is not the board's job to manage or supervise the specifics of how this is done. The board governs and the CEO executes that vision. You need to develop criteria for evaluating outcomes. You have to be able to measure the success or failure of outcomes of programs set by the board. Having clear targets defined and specific achievements outlined will help to eliminate any ambiguity of goals. Clearly articulate your organizational purpose, vision, and values. Your board should be united and able to discuss the vision and values of the organization to the public without any hesitation. Remain focused on outcomes rather than the process. This goes back to the board is responsible for how well the organization does and not how will. This sometimes gets lost on a board, especially in smaller organizations, which can hinder the performance of your executive director or CEO. You need to work at achieving a balance between over and under control. You want to allow enough freedom of the executive director to run the organization, but you also want to be aware of how things are going so that there are no surprises. It is a balancing act, but can be handled more easily when the board and executive director have open lines of communication and are working together. That is why it is important for all board members to have a good working relationship and trust with your executive director. Training. Your organization needs to train its board members. And the training is not just an initial orientation, it should be ongoing. Because board members change every few years, it is okay to reuse past trainings every few years to refresh long-term board members' memories. And attending webinars like this one can be very valuable to your organization. Okay, we are getting close to the end. I hope I haven't lost anybody, and I hope everyone has been writing down questions to ask me or Don. Now let's talk about running a successful board meeting. Your board meetings can be either successful or a complete waste of time. It is easy to have successful board meetings, but it is just as easy to have a meeting that is unproductive and your board members leave dissatisfied and disappointed. There are a few easy steps you can take to make sure your meetings are successful. The first step is to plan. You need to take some time to plan your board meetings. Don't wait till the last minute to throw an agenda together where your entire board or your entire meeting is being reactive instead of proactive. It should be the board chair's responsibility to put the agenda together. Once the agenda is completed, it should be given to your board members in advance of the meeting, hopefully at a minimum of 3 days in advance, if not more. The second step is participation. Even though it is the board chair's responsibility to put the agenda together, all board members need to participate in the process. All board members must be engaged, and if one or two seem to be sitting back and just going with the flow, the board chair should work to get them engaged. When you get board members engaged, they will become or remain motivated. The more your board members are engaged and motivated, the more productive and effective they will be, not only for your board, but the organization as well. Now, during this productive board meeting that you have planned in advance for and have gotten your board members to participate, be engaged, and are motivated to carry out the resolutions you discussed and voted on during the meeting, who is keeping the minutes? The most important aspect of any board meeting is the record of minutes of the meeting. Now, most minutes should record who was at the meeting, where was the meeting held, what day and time was the meeting held, but more importantly, what was discussed at the meeting. Now, here's the fun part. At your very first board meeting, or at any board meeting since then, did the board discuss and vote on what information and how much information from the board meeting would be kept or put into the official board minutes? Or does this change every time there's a new secretary and left up to how well or how poorly they take minutes, and then what the board votes on when they accept the minutes into the record at a later meeting? If you never have, or it has been a long time since it was reviewed, we recommend that the board discuss and vote on what and how much information is entered into the official minutes, and then try and follow your resolution as closely as possible. This is the only official record you have of decisions carried out by the board. Did you include discussions of the items you voted on? I always tell people, if it is not in the minutes, it did not happen, and what is written is what was voted on. I have heard more than one board that got in trouble for a decision they made say, that was not the intent, or that is not what I meant. You were not there at the meeting. And my response is, exactly. I was not at the meeting, and neither was the judge or jury that you may have to go in front of for a bad decision. Now, I'm not saying you should have every word of discussion in your minutes, but you should have a clear description of what was discussed and who provided input on each discussion. And when the board goes to vote on the acceptability of the minutes, they should make sure they read the minutes carefully to make sure they are clear and show the proper intent of what was discussed at the meeting. Maintain minutes of all board meetings and committee meetings for committees that are authorized to act on behalf of the board, such as an executive committee. We see many nonprofits keep minutes for their board meetings, but many forget to make sure their committees are keeping minutes and providing them to the board as well. So how do you know if all the work you are doing, implementing and following policies and procedures is working and making your nonprofit a better organization? This is where organizational assessments come into play. They can help you make sure you are on the right track before it is too late. Assessments can help tell you how well your organization is doing. They should show what went wrong, what went right, what tools you used, what processes you followed. There are different types of assessments. First, let's discuss board assessments, which review how the board did as a group. You need this in order to identify where you are performing well as a board and where you might improve. Discussions about board roles and responsibilities can strengthen communication and understanding among your board members. The discussions can lead to stronger, more cohesive working groups. Your board's willingness to engage in self-assessments is a model for the rest of the organization. It indicates that board members take their responsibilities very seriously. The board's interest in self-improvement sets a tone for others in the organization to engage in an ongoing review of how services are delivered. How should your board members evaluate themselves? One way is by board members taking a self-assessment. The results of the self-assessments then become the basis for the discussion. Another way is to have an independent committee interview each board member, the executive director or CEO, and anyone else named by the board. The results of those interviews then become the basis for your discussion. Who should be involved in the evaluations? Each and every board member should participate in the self-evaluation by completing a board self-assessment form and be involved in the discussion when the entire board reviews each self-assessment. The executive director is also an important resource. Varying levels of involvement by the executive director or CEO are appropriate, from being a full participant in the process to contributing advice and support for the process, to providing comments on the board-CEO relationship. Most boards conduct the board and CEO evaluations in tandem, since the success of one entity depends on the effectiveness of the other. In addition, boards may consider inviting comments from those who are part of the management team. Their perspectives can add valuable insight to the board process. However, evaluations that involve others need to be clearly designed so that the information is based on a board-established criteria of effectiveness. Consultants and facilitators can often be helpful to boards in developing and conducting an evaluation as well. They can provide an independent, non-biased influence to help keep board discussions focused and positive. The purpose of self-assessments are for a positive result, not to start accusing of who's not doing what, but it's really to help your board stay positive. The Nonprofit Guidance Center, we can help arrange for consultants to assist in this process for you. Now, how often should boards evaluate themselves? Formal assessment should occur annually. Getting into the habit of regular evaluations make the process part of the board culture and lessens resistance to self-assessment. New boards or boards with a significant number of new members may wish to hold sessions more often as the members are learning to work together as a team. Well, we've made it. We covered a lot of information today, and there are 4 things you will hopefully take away from today. The first thing is, you are here today because you want your organization to succeed. Your other board members want your organization to succeed as well. So remember to work together and try and help each other out. And if you have a board member that is not meeting your board's expectations, let them know it. Make sure you and your board share responsibilities so you do not burn out. Don't try and be a hero, and let someone else do most of the work, because eventually they will burn out. You and your board members have a commitment to your organization. Your organization needs to make the same commitment to your board members. How does the organization do that? By making sure your board has the tools to succeed as a board, and a lot of that is accomplished through training. You may have a tight budget, but do not overlook the value training can provide you and your board. If nothing else, hopefully the training will help motivate or invigorate your board to be more productive. We have created the Nonprofit Guidance Center to help nonprofits and provide valuable information. You can sign up to receive our free risk management and training blog post at our website, www.nonprofitguidance.com. And don't forget, if you would like to save 20% on a copy of our book, Nonprofit Guidance for the Nonprofit Board Member, visit the Nonprofit Guidance website at www.nonprofitguidance.com/SPWeb. That's nonprofitguidance.com/SPWEB in order to receive the discount. The book is a great resource that gives an overview of expectations and obligations of being on a nonprofit board without being overwhelming. It is something your board members can refer to over and over. It is also a great recruiting tool for prospective board members, because if after they read the book they still want to be a board member of a nonprofit, you will have a strong and dedicated board member. The book is only $24.95 plus tax and shipping, but if you order it within the next 5 days at the link shown here and enter the code that is provided on the site, you will save 20%. Or you can order it on Amazon.com at the full price. Don and I would like to thank everyone for attending today. We do hope you found the information we provided today was beneficial to your organization. We will be happy to answer any questions you may have. If you email us at webinar@nonprofitguidance.com, either Don or I will get back to you within the next 24 hours. Thank you again for attending. We appreciate your time, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day or evening. Thank you.